The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. And Eason have a rich heritage of book selling since 1886. It's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and hopefully your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. So stay listening for Ryan Recommends, of course, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. And make sure to browse your local Eason store for your next book, or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Whether you're after the latest bestseller, a hidden gem, or a classic read, Eason has you covered. Eason, be inspired. Today on The Bookshelf, we are thrilled to be joined by one of Ireland's most iconic voices. And I mean that not just in a metaphorical way, but a very distinctive voice in sports journalism and political commentary. Best known for his outspoken commentary and insightful analysis, he made a profound mark on Irish football and Irish broadcasting generally. The author of many, many books, including Only a Game, which remains in print decades after its release in 1976. Today, we step beyond the pitch as he shares his favourite childhood book, the story that made him laugh or gave him joy, and indeed the book that had left a lasting impact. Welcome, Eamon Dunphy.
It's a pleasure to be here. I listened to the programme and I like it.
Well, thank you for saying so.
The interest in books is so important.
Yeah, you were brought up in a house that had either books or many visits to the library. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it didn't have very much. It had only newspaper, my dad's newspaper, which he'd come home every night, and usually Irish Independent. And I began reading when I was about 3 or 4, reading the paper and reading even the leading article, as it used to be called in those days. And that was, but my great breakthrough was when I discovered public library, which was quite close to my school in Drumcondra. And I went, joined, and I thought it was heaven. Got my ticket and took a book out. Yeah. And read it in a day or two. Went back and with the book to get another one. And the librarian said, "I'm sorry, you have to wait 2 weeks to get another book," which was a real killer. But I began, and I understood the value, how precious a public library can be for people who don't live in houses full of books, which I didn't.
No, and that's why I always argue reading is very democratic. You know, you know, if unfortunately you could only get one book out every 2 weeks, that's not very democratic. But they are free, and it's all there for you. All those books, all those ideas, all those stories waiting for you. Yeah, and in one of our periods of austerity here, I think Charlie Haughey was in office. They cut back on libraries, and closed some, which I thought was a vandal act. And was very upset about it, as a lot of people were, because a lot of people, I think, you know, the idea of a library for people who need books and haven't got easy access to them is wonderful, and particularly for young people to get into the habit of reading. You mentioned your dad and the Irish Independent, so that was your kind of entree to your gateway drug to reading everything. So were both your folks encouraging you to read, or was it one more than the other, or was there no encouragement? Were you just like, off you go, if you want to find the library, go for it?
Well, I think they encouraged me to be, and my brother, my late brother, now to be good students, go to school, learn, don't mess. And I was a bit of a messer outside, but never in school. And
that surprises me.
Well, I actually had a great teacher, as many people do. A man called Mr. Hayden, and he saw that I had a bit of something in me, and he encouraged me. And I came from a poor home and didn't always have the clothes that other kids had. And he knew I needed extra encouragement. But if you have somebody like that, it's amazing. I'm sure almost everybody who's fortunate enough to get on in life will reflect on a teacher they had that was encouraging.
It comes up quite a lot on this program, this teacher who changes, and not just a moment, but a life.
Yeah,
in a moment sometimes.
Yes, and it was very important for me, this man, and all the way, because in those days in primary school you had the same teacher all the way through, and he was a formative influence on my life with reading, and also with encouraging me to be good in school.
Yeah,
I was good. I was good at sums and stuff.
Yes.
And so I didn't mess. Once I messed. We had a notorious teacher who used a leather strap very often, and I stole the strap one day with my mates, and we went to the bridge where the Tolka flowed. It's on the airport road, and I threw the leather into the river, and everyone cheered. And then, holy God, what have I done? Will he catch me?
Yeah.
I think I was caught.
Yeah.
Someone shopped me.
Someone shopped you?
Yeah. And, I was a goody-goody in school, but this is my great act of rebellion.
Well, I'm just curious, was there retribution?
It was, yeah. It was pretty grim. You used to get beaten on the hand.
Yeah.
Not, I don't think, what you'd probably know as Christian Brothers retribution, which would be a clatter on the head.
Yeah.
There wasn't any of that.
Yes.
But there was, I understand, in other schools.
Yeah, of course. So that very important teacher was kind of guiding you towards the books. What about your folks? Were they hands-on or light touch regulation?
They were, football was my big thing. And apart from books, funnily enough, they were very encouraging, yes. My mother was a fabulous woman, and she was very supportive of me and my brother to do things that we liked doing.
Okay. And your father?
Father was great. He was sports mad.
Yeah.
Had a hard life at work. We were a poor family, and in the 50s, the 40s and 50s, in fact, it was very difficult. Builder's labourer, come home from work, $5 a week wages. Not a lot. But those people were fantastic people. And my mother had religion. She was very devout, Catholic. And my father had his pals and a few pints in the pub after the match. And that was a very important thing to him. He was an outward-going man, a bit of a character, funny sort of man, a nice, good gentleman.
Let's go to your first book then, the book from your childhood. What were you reading that kind of sparked this interest in literature? Because you had this, we'll get onto this, you were a sports guy, but very much a reading guy too. So you've got you spun the two plates beautifully. So let's talk about those formative days. Well,
comics were the first thing that entered my life.
Yeah.
And I listened to one of your guests talk recently about the first books and comics he read. And one of them was Just William.
That's right.
The Just William books are fabulous. And Just William was a scamp, a bit of an imp and a messer. And he had a gang, and they fought with other gangs, and they fought with adults, and they did things they shouldn't be doing. So Just William, it was a series of books, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And that encouraged me. I also heard the same guest talk about Biggles.
Yeah.
Biggles was a pilot in the RAF. And now you must remember, Ryan, I was born in 1945.
Okay.
Which is the last year of the Second World War.
Yeah.
So for 10 years afterwards, I was reading this 5 or 6 years afterwards.
Yeah.
It
was fresh.
Fighter pilots were heroes.
Yeah.
And Biggles was a hero, and an English hero, I have to say, as indeed Just William was an English boy. And I read Biggles. And then a new comic came out. And Roy of the Rovers.
Classic.
Was a footballer. Mm-hmm. And he was a great footballer. And he always led his team to last-minute victories against all the odds. And he became a kind of iconic figure for me and a role model, because I was beginning to play football on the street. And Royal Rovers was just wonderful. You had to, I suppose, as an adult, reflecting on it, you must have been prepared to suspend your disbelief because he always got the winning goal. But all the way through the story, you thought, they're going to lose. Yeah. They're going to lose.
Like James Bond with the football.
He played for, the team he played for, I checked it when I knew we were going to talk about it, books, Melchester Rovers. Now, that's a kind of play on Manchester United, Melchester. Yeah. And that was, it's incredible and very difficult to explain how engrossing those characters were. Biggles, Royal Rovers, Just William, and how much happiness you derived from it.
Sure.
And how, again, as you know, books can take you to another place in a way that nothing else can. In a way, even that film can't. There's something intimate about you, the book, and your imagination. It's very, very...
It's personal. It's intimate, and I always think about a book is you're making the movie yourself as you're reading it. You're casting it. You're directing it. Yeah. You even have the locations painted in your mind,
and you're in it.
And you're in it yourself if you want to be. You want to be a player manager. That's not. Yeah, it definitely depends which character you want to be in. Yeah. And when sport came into your life meaningfully, and you went over to the UK to play football or soccer, whatever you want to call it, was reading was there always a book in the bag, or did you get distracted by the ball? Or tell me a bit about that.
Well, I would always, if you were a professional player, which I was, you only worked in the mornings, trained in the mornings, and then from midday onwards, you were free. Yeah, and that's a lot of time dead time. Especially when you've no money, and we didn't have much. And I started reading then. Lots of time to read. And that's where I sort of developed or cultivated the habit of reading and the pleasure of reading, which it was a huge thing for me, from reading my father's newspaper to going on to comics and then to books. It was the most important thing in my life, other than football. And
were the other players looking at you saying, look at your man with his book, or was it as common as nowadays somebody with a phone scrolling?
No, they didn't really, because I was a bit of a jack the lad as I was becoming a teenager. So the big thing on the long coach journeys in England, from London to Hartlepool, which is a 5-hour each way journey. So I'd play cards, and playing cards was the big thing. Yeah. And I'd play a bit of cards, have a bit of a mess, but I'd always go back to my book. So it was accepted that at some stage...
You were gone.
I was gone to the book, yeah. If, I'd lost all my money at cards, you'd lose a lot of money.
Would you?
I saw guys do a week's wages on one-hand poker. Okay. Not funny.
Not funny. Not at that stage. No. What are your happiest memories in wearing a football jersey?
Oh, well, I played for Ireland, which was an honour. Yeah. Every match you won was a big deal. So I played for Millwall, who were unfashionable. In what was then the second division, is now the Championship. I never played. I was at Manchester United for 5 years, but I never ever got to play in the first team.
Why not?
Because George Best was playing, and
that's
Dennis Law.
That's the best answer you could give a man, isn't it?
Yeah, and George is a very good and close friend of mine, and a very bright guy.
When you talked about Jack the Lads, there's the...
Well, he was with the girls, but not with the lads. He wasn't a lad's lad.
Oh, interesting.
He was very quiet. George would sit in the coach for hours and say nothing. But if you went to a disco with him, the girls were crazy for him. Okay. And he reciprocated. So it was, he loved girls, and he loved it killed him in the end, the fame and the adoration.
Yeah.
But he was kind of the fifth Beatle, they dubbed him in the newspapers.
Yeah.
He was very good looking. He had a kind of quiet way about him, a bit of mystery.
Yeah.
We were great pals. We used to go dancing together. I took him to a dance, his first dance, I think, in a place in Manchester called the Plaza, which was owned by Jimmy Savile.
Oh, crikey.
Yeah, Jimmy Savile was a big figure in Manchester in those days. He owned a club called the Three Coins, which was on Fountain Street.
Your memory is clean, anyway.
Well, it is, yeah.
Did you meet him along the way then?
Oh, I did, yeah. He used to drive a Rolls Royce around Manchester, which was quite rare in those days. He picked girls up. He had a bad reputation even then for being a lech. And he used to boast that his apartment had only one piece of furniture, which was the bed.
Yeah.
He ran the Plaza, which was the ballroom, a big deal. I saw the Beatles play in the Three Coins.
Wow.
Yeah. Jerry and the Pacemakers. All sorts of fantastic bands from the north of England played there. And the Hollies.
Great.
And
gosh, you saw all the...
Well, yeah, and they'd be playing at lunchtime, some of them, not the Beatles. But the Hollies played at lunchtime. So when we finished training, we'd head into town, go to the Plaza, and that's where George was. You know, we were very good friends. Played snooker. He loved big snooker.
Is that right?
Snooker, girls, girls, girls.
And then Savile, like a dark creature in the corner.
Was.
Yeah.
He had a bad reputation, but lots of people have bad reputations. And then when all the stuff came out about the extent of it, that he was a sicko.
Yeah, proper.
You know, it was a big shock to everybody, including the BBC, who were, you know.
But you say we all thought he was this thing. And then he was hiding in plain sight for decades and then knighted and everything and then off, you know. So
he was.
He got away with
Manchester's a small city, really. And he was at the centre of it. There was a scene, which we all would dip in and out of. And he ran the big venues.
So everyone was flocking to it.
Yeah.
Did you, when you mentioned Manchester United, was that frustrating for you?
Well, it was, it was a journey. To go to Manchester United from Dublin was a dream. But then Manchester United was I went there in 1960, 2 years after the Munich air crash. Yeah. Which the team, 8 of them died. And they were a great team. They were champions and they were young. So Manchester United was a very big deal in Manchester. And here too, because one of those players, Liam Whelan, was an Irish international and a great player. So it was a club that team made Manchester United famous around the world. And the tragedy of the Munich air crash, or as it was called, the Munich air disaster, it elevated Manchester United into iconic status around the world. I mean, I know you're not a football guy, but Manchester
we all know
United,
that story.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
You know what I mean? There was a sort of mystery to it and a tragedy to it that was just for the transcendent sport.
Yeah, but I went to play there. But in 1968, they had the pick of the best young players around the British Isles.
Yeah.
So I knew what I was going into. And it was tough. I was there for 5 years. But I never developed the upper body strength you need to be a top-class player. Mainly because I was smoking. I was out all night at discos. One night, and we used to go to the Dogs. I had another friend, Barry Fry, who's well known to football people. We used to go to the Dogs, maybe some every night of the week sometimes.
Yeah.
There was 3 dog tracks in Manchester.
Yeah.
And
I'm just wondering where your commitment to the sport was.
well, the dogs are over it.
They're a sport.
10 o'clock. But you'd lose your money.
Yeah.
I remember losing all my wages on a Thursday, which is payday, and having to stay out all night because I wasn't able to pay my rent.
Wow.
And I got bronchitis. A night watchman let me stay in his hut. Jesus, desperate thing. This is, you're away. You're 16.
Yeah. Did you miss Ireland when you were away, or were you very much? Look, I'm young. It's an adventure. I'm glad I'm out of Ireland. I mean, what were you?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure what the right answer is. I loved coming home in the summer, and coming home to Ireland was coming into a new world. And I loved that. I loved seeing my parents and my late brother, Kevin. And yet, I couldn't wait to go back at the same time.
Yeah,
back to the football, back to the buzz, and back to the freedom.
Yeah.
I couldn't act the maggot.
Yeah.
I couldn't stay out all night when I was living with my mum and dad,
Yeah. So it was a tale of two Dunphys. I mean, you had Dublin Dunphy and UK Dunphy and or Eamon, I should say, and you could live a very different life and yet come home to decent meal and a bit of the familiar.
Yeah, and it was a bit restrictive here. Like you couldn't get in when I was 16. You couldn't get into a dance, because you were too young.
Yes, yeah.
And I remember trying to get into a dance. Where there was a dance hall there up on Parnell Square. It was the nurses' dance. It was on a Thursday night. And nurses were renowned for many things, caring and looking after their patients.
You're an awful man. I know what you're saying to me. I know what you're saying. I speak fluent twinkle.
Yeah, and nurses had a reputation for being fond of guys. So we tried to me and a couple of friends tried to get into the nurses' dance. And they wouldn't let us in. And I put on an English accent. I said, listen, I've come to Ireland. And the guy said, will you fuck off, Ed?
He knew exactly.
I was trying to play the tourist.
Great. I love it. He knew exactly. Welcome home. So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. And I'm going to shop local and go for an Irish writer this week. It's Lisa Harding and her book, The Wildlings. Everyone's comparing this book to The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And fair enough, it is set in a university. It is a bunch of friends. But there's probably a little more drama in some ways to this book. And of course, because it's based loosely on what looks like Trinity College, a lot of people will recognise all the local places and places in town and so forth. But it is a very, very vicious, sardonic, cruel little book in many, many ways, but very dramatic at the same time. It's short as well, and I lapped it up. So I'm going to go for this week, The Wildlings by Lisa Harding. Give it a go. Now let's get back to the show. Let's talk about the book that changed your life. Where are we going for that one, Eamon Dunphy?
Well, the book that changed my life was a book, two books, I think.
Yeah.
Arthur Koestler wrote a book called Darkness at Noon, which I have here, as you can see.
So you've brought in some well-loved and battered books. I love it.
Yeah, they are. It says here, one of the few books written in this epoch which will survive it. It's about, Koestler had been a journalist, a writer, and he'd been a communist for 6 years. He was a member of the Communist Party. And then the light sort of came on in his head, and he realised. And it's a book which exposed the tyranny of Stalin and of communism and the oppression. Koestler was a Hungarian, and they knew from, I think it was 1956, there was an uprising against communism, and the Russians went in and, they were... It was
a brutal crackdown.
Same thing happened in Czechoslovakia subsequently. Yeah. But he wrote a book called Darkness at Noon. It's about an old Bolshevik who has now been betrayed for speaking unkindly about the regime and is in prison. And if you think about Alexei Navalny and what Putin did to him, and he only died last year, this is in that territory. The torture, the torment, the brutality of it, the way they break you down. And the worst of them in this book, it's a great book, a very absorbing book. The worst torturers, really, are the guards, who are actually working class people. And the main character is middle class. And he wants an equal and fair society.
For these guys.
Justice. And it's for those guys. And I was a member of the Communist Party for 3 weeks, I think. At some stage, I was certainly very left-wing in those days. And it was an eye-opener. The other book, or idea, was George Orwell's 1984, except Orwell wasn't a really great prose writer. He had this amazing
ideas and concepts and vision.
And he was a brilliant essayist. I mean, Orwell's essays are brilliant.
And 1984 is a shockingly good book.
It's a great idea. But it's not well written. In my opinion.
No, I appreciate that.
But it nevertheless, it rang the same bell that Kessler's book rang. And then I began to think. And when you say change your life, it set me thinking about, and Kessler is very good about this, means and ends. If you want to have a society that's fair and just with equal opportunities, how do you get it? And do the means, and this is the story of Soviet communism, really, do the means destroy the end?
Sure.
Which is fairness. And this book is about that, really.
Yeah.
And as you said, like, the worst people are the working class people who are locking people up, inflicting
in this book, in this story, absolutely. And it reminded me of a documentary about Mariupol in Ukraine.
Yes,
recently it won an Oscar last year, I think. And they were looting a shop in what could have been Grafton Street or Piccadilly, wherever you might be. It just looked so contemporary, because it was.
Yes.
And there was a woman in the shop, and she was turning around to these people who are essentially her neighbours and saying, why are you doing this?
Yes.
And they're saying, it's a war. Yeah. And the point that was made was that if somebody then was saying, what's happening here? And they said, in war, bad people get worse and good people get better.
Yes.
And I think equally those guards were, they got worse.
Well, they're creatures of the system and much more likely to be collaborators with the tyrants. And if you, again, to think of Putin right now, the torture of Navalny.
And others.
And other dissidents.
The balcony fallers and the poison darters and whatever you want to call them. But there's a plethora of them.
Well, the way Putin who is a gangster and a tyrant, to say the very least.
And a friend of the President of America.
Well, to hear the President of the United States of America talk respectfully.
It's quite remarkable.
Even warmly about Vladimir Putin is deeply shocking when you consider what Putin has done to his people. And I have one or two friends who are Russian.
Yeah.
And they are shocked. People are shocked. This is a big moment in history. Yeah. And it's not going to change back.
Yeah.
That's what's frightening about it. There's no going back from where America is today. None.
Yeah.
And I think that's frightening.
You brought in a book that you recommended to me about 20 years ago by Norman Mailer. And I went and I bought that book, Eamon Dunphy. And I say that as you chuckle because you know exactly what's coming next, which is the greatest miscarriage of justice in Irish history, that is to say between us in the last 20 years. And it's called The Executioner's Song. And I bought that book and it was a good recommendation because I loved it. But it did take me a while. It's a chunk of a book.
Yeah.
Now, tell me about The Miscarriage of Justice.
The Miscarriage of Justice is like many people who love books. When I love a book and I like somebody and I liked you, you want to share it.
Yeah.
So I thought that I'd brought it in to you when I was on the Late Late Show one night and given it to you.
No.
Because I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And I accused you.
Repeatedly, I think. Yes.
Repeatedly. Every time I saw you,
let's get this right.
Said,
you'd say, where's my
my book?
Yeah.
And did you read it? And and then when you asked me to do this program with you, immediately I thought, The Executioner's Song.
Yeah.
So I said to my wife Jane, I told her the story, which I told her 100 times before. The following day she came downstairs, and here it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Eamon Dunphy's original copy, unborrowed and unlent, right here in front of us today.
I confess, I wrongly accused you. I think I further accused you of not reading it.
Yeah, which was actually the bigger crime.
Yeah, but it's an amazing book by Mailer. Mailer's a curious character from the 60s. He was. I read a lot of his stuff. He wrote journalism as well.
Yeah,
and he's very sort of now passé, I would say, but. This is a great book. He never met Gary Gilmore, who is the subject of the book, the executioner, in fact. But a lot of research, he got 12 people to research everything, to interview Gilmore and all of that. It's an astonishing book. Now, we know that books, I think we've agreed that books can take you to another place. And what the Executioner's Song does is take you inside the mind of someone who has committed a number of murders, been in prison for murder for 17 years, come out and murdered another 2 people. And then when he's put on trial, there hadn't been, the death penalty had been abolished in America for about 20 years. And now the state were looking to execute Gary Gilmore.
Yes.
And he wanted to be executed. In the end, he was found guilty, and in the end, he was executed. And his choice was to be shot. And that's what happened in the United States of America in the 60s. And Mailer got engaged in this, and he has a description, really, of Gary Gilmore's mind, what he was thinking of.
Yes.
What he loved, what he didn't love, what drove him to do the things that he did. And it's an examination of a psychopath, of violence, of what triggers it, what the consequences are for the victims. It's a remarkable book. And it is a book that, as all the best books do, I think, stays with you in some way and describes America at a certain moment. And he always wanted, I mean, he was a big polemicist. He was always on television. He led the marches on Washington during the Vietnam War, for example. He was one of the leaders of that. And he always wanted to write what he called the great American novel. Hemingway had a go. They'd all had a go. The Great Gatsby and all the books were acclaimed in that way.
Yes.
And he got wrapped up in that, I think, and lost himself. He wrote a few very mediocre books afterwards, but this is a great book.
This is the book that I didn't borrow from you. And you have Gore Vidal, for example, Norman Mailer, latterly Hunter S. Thompson, and, you know, journalists that were writing these books, but were also, like you say, on TV with Dick Cavett or whoever it might have been, being contrarian, very masculine, very testosterone fueled, and eminently entertaining. If you whether you agreed with them or not. That sounds like I'm describing you in the 1980s and to an extent the 1990s, because you did become a figure of you know, a kind of a contrarian, somebody who would throw a few kites up in the sky and see how they flew. And I would think you were acting the maggot sometimes. I think you believed most of what you said. Sometimes you just did it to be a tricky customer. Were they guys that you would have channeled, do you think, when you were doing journalism post-soccer career? I mean...
Not really. I actually felt very strongly, I suppose, that the public image and the private person are often very different. I also would have become notorious for opposing terrorism at a time here when people kept quiet about it, when the North was, suffered from terrible violence, including blowing up chip shops and pubs. And I was against that. That was a genuine belief in a peace process and a peaceful resolution of things. Now, that wasn't certainly done to be provocative. I never really was provocative. I think what I was interested in. I worked for the Sunday Independent. I had a very good editor, Angus Fanning, the late Angus Fanning, and he wanted good copy. And because I was, I was fearless. I didn't give a fuck about the establishment or anyone else for that matter. And I said, okay. And John Hume, Seamus Heaney, all kinds of people, Mary Robinson. These were all iconic figures. That I thought weren't iconic and I thought were worth having a look at.
A pop at?
Well, a pop at, but a pop is sometimes saying, look, this person is presenting as X. I think they're Y. So stripping away, you might say, the layer of the public
perception, if you want.
Yeah.
And you look at, enough time has passed actually for history to be certainly drafting the first copy of how they've done, and they've come out of it rather well.
They have, yeah. It's funny, I was sued for libel and lost indeed. It was a pivotal moment in my... the biggest libel award ever in the history of the state, 300 grand. This is in 1980 something.
Yeah.
And a great friend of mine and a great barrister, Adrian Hardiman.
Yes.
Who's now dead.
Also dead, yes.
Yeah, and died very young.
Yeah.
He was the person designated. He was the best, regarded as the best barrister down there in the Four Courts. And he was the one questioning me.
Yes.
And
remind people who
Francis de Rossa was the politician.
Workers' Party leader.
Yeah,
coalition.
I accused him of something to do with violence.
Yeah.
However, it is a big case now, and for me and for the paper. And Adrian Hardiman was preeminent barrister and razor sharp, bright as you couldn't believe.
Sure.
So he had 10 minutes before the court rose to start his cross-examination of me. And in those 10 minutes, he gave me a little idea where he was going. Then, proceeding the end of the day, next morning, I come back. But I've sat there all night and worked out a plan. And it goes to your thing about how these people did. And his point was, you enjoy it. Much like your point. You're doing this...
To act the maggot.
To take down these great people.
Yeah.
And you're the beneficiary of it all.
Yeah.
So I worked it out. Next morning he started on that thing. So I said, well, Mr. Hardiman, just let me explain how these people have been wounded. John Hume has won the Nobel Prize for Peace. Mary Robinson is the most respected person in the country. I think she was still president at the time. And on and on.
And Seamus Heaney
won
the Nobel Prize for Literature eventually.
The most loved.
Yeah,
and
respected
people.
poet, yes.
So your idea that I'm taking these people down is quite wrong. I'm actually boosting them. And my final line was, if you're not careful, I'll say something nice about you and you'll be finished. So, we lost the case.
But okay.
The judge laughed.
Yeah, I'd say.
And the jury laughed.
Yeah.
And we actually drew that version of the case, but he came back for Tony O'Reilly, the late Tony O'Reilly, wouldn't settle. He wanted 50 grand to settle. Yeah. And I said, give it to him. I never had to pull that stroke again.
Yeah. Let's talk about the book that brought you joy, Eamon, because and thanks for bringing all these beautiful books in with you, by the way. That well thumbed. I see one there that that was given to me on loan, and it was very much on loan. I gave it back to him, which is Gay Byrne, the late. He loved it because there's a great line in it. I don't know if I don't want to give it away if you want to share it. No. There's the line in it. We're talking about adventures in the screen trade by William Goldman.
Yes,
and it's an unlikely book, but the line he says in it, and I think it's not until a man or a woman hits a certain age where you realise nobody knows anything.
Yes.
That's the
right.
line, and that's the line in that book. No one knows. Up until then you think, well, they'll know, and they're in charge, and then you realise, I was in school with him. He knows nothing.
Yes. And it's a great book. It's a funny book. He was a screenwriter and producer in Hollywood. And I think he's still alive. He wrote this is a great book. Yeah. It's just funny.
Yeah, it's great fun. It's kind of gossipy, but also intriguing.
I gave it to a friend of mine, Stuart Carlin, who you'll know is a writer, a very good one.
Yeah, wrote Love Hate. Yeah,
yes,
super guy.
And he never gave it back to me either.
No, don't hang either. Either suggests. As you were saying.
Okay. Yep. He never gave it back to me, but he dropped this back into me the other day. His subsequent book.
Yes.
Which is also very good. This is a classic, as you say, was, which lie did I tell you last? It was also about Hollywood.
Yeah. More mischief, though. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
That's the fun of it.
Yeah.
You've got it. I noticed you wrote a couple of books of poetry. Is that just random or?
No, it's
English poets, I might say.
Yeah, they are, and it's something I read now, and I read at the time. Philip Larkin. And John Betjeman are two of them. W.H. Auden I didn't bring, but I find now that if I don't want to get stuck into a big, thick book, I can't imagine reading the Executioner Song now. But Betjeman is a poet. I love his poetry. And Larkin.
Yeah.
And I read them when I was in England. And they were hugely important to understanding England. And you're there now. Mm-hmm. I would recommend them because the English are remarkable people. I was never anti-English. Mm-hmm. They have their quirks and they had their empire, but Betjeman is a marvelous poet. Yeah, obsessed with sex.
Yeah.
But in a very British way.
In Larkin, of course, famously talked about sex and
he did,
the Beatles, didn't he? Yeah.
He did. He did.
So
sex began in 1963.
Yes.
Just before the something or other and the Beatles' first LP.
Yeah, and the Beatles' first LP. So you picked two fellas who write about sex in that most English way, which it probably is to barely allude to it, but actually be mildly chaotic about it in their reality.
Yes, I'm not sure how much will need to edit out. But Larkin's, he wrote a poem which is entitled. Its title is "This Is the One."
Yeah,
and it's the poem about your mum and dad. Mm-hmm. Am I allowed to say it?
Yeah, of course.
They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do.
Yeah,
they give you all the faults they had, and add a special one for you. It's one of the funniest.
It's great.
It's one of the funniest poems, and it goes on.
Yeah.
Betjeman also, and Larkin. Larkin is a really good prose writer. And I think they are such great prose writers because, and Auden was as well, because poetry doesn't allow for any loose words.
No fat on the bone. Yeah.
No fat on the bone, no, precisely. And it helps you and enables you to be a really good prose writer. And they are both, Larkin, and the two books I have there, I'd be happy to read them on my deathbed.
Yeah.
The Betjeman's funny, and Larkin is very funny.
The humour is important, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
If you're not laughing, it's kind of a bit grim.
Yeah, I mean, there's a marvellous long Larkin poem about a Midsummer's Dance when he's trying to get a girl. Or, as we used to say, I won't say it. But
say what you want. He's
trying to get his hole.
Yes, okay. Well,
that's
the dictionary definition in Dublin, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, these guys are better at it, British, I think.
I'm going to leave it at that. That is classic Eamon Dunphy way to finish a conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you. You're in fine fettle, sharp as a tack as always, and there's no mess in there, no meat in the bone with you, Eamon. It's good to see you, and good luck with everything.
Thank you very much indeed. I enjoyed it.
And there you have it, another packed episode with some great book recommendations for you to enjoy, all brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. So shop in your local Eason store or explore hundreds of thousands of titles online at easons.com. Order before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch and enjoy free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.